Welcome to For the Long Run, the podcast exploring the why behind what keeps runners running long, strong, and motivated. I'm your host, Jonathan Levitt. Through personal and professional connections in the running world, I have the privilege of getting to know some amazing athletes. I've always been fascinated by the psychological aspect of running, and this podcast is aimed at exploring this and much more. I hope you enjoy. This episode is sponsored by GU Energy Labs, a performance sports nutrition brand that I love. I've been using GU products for the majority of my running career, and watching their products and team evolve over time has been super cool to see. Offering initially just energy gels, they now offer gels, chews, Stroop waffles, post-training recovery mix, electrolyte options, traditional nutritional supplements like vitamin D, magnesium, and more. I use just about all of their products on a regular basis, and lately have been loving their liquid gels, which I found to be the easiest mid-run fuel of anything I've tried yet. For the Long Run listeners, get 20% off anything on their site with the code FTLR at gooenergy.com. Enjoy. Welcome back. I have Sarah Bowen Shea joining me today on the podcast. Sarah, thanks so much for taking some time to chat.
I'm delighted to be here, Jonathan.
For sure. And as many of our listeners will hear, your sound quality is excellent because you're also a podcaster. So thank you for that. Yeah. But before we dive in too far, first question is, who is Sarah?
Oh, who is Sarah? Sarah is me, a mom of three teenagers in Portland, Oregon. I am the co-founder of Another Mother Runner, which is a largely online community for women runners. And before that, I was a freelance magazine journalist. And I'm a native of Connecticut, I guess my mother would want me to tell you. So nice. She doesn't like it when I say I'm from Portland, Oregon, because that implies I grew up here. She's right. Totally fine if I grew up here, but that doesn't tell the whole story.
Where in Connecticut?
Stamford.
Oh, my sister lives there.
Oh, yeah? Yeah.
Yeah, small world.
Yes.
Well, awesome. So let's sort of set the stage here with you as a runner, and then we'll dive into all the other amazing stuff.
Okay.
Do you remember your first run?
It must have been in high school. I was dating a guy who was a runner, very avid runner, and so it must have been that. But the one that really, the first run that really stands out in my mind, and that for me really is the starting point for me being a runner, was I went to Colgate University, which is in central New York, and I joined the rowing team after not being athletic in school before that. And the novices were supposed to run to the boathouse, which is 3 miles away from campus, and it's slightly uphill the whole way. And
snowing, right?
Right, with wind fiercely blowing in your face. Now that was, a month later in October, but and so I very much remember that run out there, and even then feeling like super badass because a lot of women who were my cohorts didn't come back after the second or third time, and I stuck with it and just loved the rowing. I grew to love running. It was an opening of a new world for me.
What was it that you loved so much?
That feeling of competence, and particularly with rowing, and then, whether we ran to or from the boathouse, getting a ton of stuff done before pretty much anybody else was awake. I have always been a morning person, and so I took most days I had an 8 a.m. class and a 9 a.m. class, and I was so bummed I couldn't have a 10:20. So I took one a little later. But I remember my 8 a.m. class, my 8 a.m. professor telling me at the end of the semester, he was like, "Thank you so much for talking. Everyone else seemed to sleep in class." I was like, "Oh no, I've been awake. I got stuff done already. Let me tell you more."
You were having lunch.
Yeah. Let me tell you more about Marlowe and Shakespeare and all that stuff. So.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
It's funny that the type of person that considers himself a morning person
is annoying.
Annoying is one word, but I think so. I've been a part of a community here in Boston called November Project, and it was founded by rowers, who want to keep each other accountable at 6 a.m.
Yeah.
And But what they said was nobody is a morning person. Some people are just better at dealing with the mornings, and coffee helps.
Oh, I just because I'm particularly not a night person,
Yeah.
and I just really I feel my batteries completely run down by the time the dinner dishes get put away into the dishwasher, hopefully by someone else. And and so when we have people on the show who are like, "Oh, I hop on my treadmill at 10 p.m. after everybody's gone to sleep," I'm like, "Oh, no, 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 that I couldn't be doing that." So yeah, no, I love the mornings. I love, like this morning I saw the sunrise and, the clouds being all orange and purpley, and it was quite lovely.
That's awesome. So in between that run this morning and those first couple of miles um,
At
at
Colgate.
Colgate,
Uh-huh.
yeah, what did that path look like for you?
So, so definitely discovered my inner runner while I was at Colgate. And then when I graduated, I moved to San Francisco, got a job that paid absolutely nothing. And so didn't have the money to join a gym. And, San Francisco is a beautiful city where you want to be outside every minute of every day, or at least I do. So ran a lot there. I lived in a very hilly part of San Francisco called Potrero Hill, which I'll give you one guess if there's hills or not there. And so I would just get up before work and run back and forth across those super hilly streets. And from there, did a few races. I was married to my first husband. He and I ran together when we lived there. We moved to Boston and then Wellesley, ran out there. I loved running around Wellesley and Weston and Lincoln and all those places. And then moved back to San Francisco, more running, took rowing back up again. And then actually ran I guess I didn't run my first marathon until 1998. And then I've run the majority of them since I had kids, and my oldest daughter's 18. So she was born in January of 2002. And so I think I ran 2 marathons before that, and I've run 12 since then. Um, so,
That is a pretty succinct story
oh,
of
oh my gosh.
a lot of miles in a very little amount of time.
That's so funny because as I was talking, I thought, "Oh, I need to shorten this up. I'm talking. I'm talking about being outside in San Francisco. They think it's going to be a really long answer, so I need to cut it, cut it, cut it."
So it's always funny. So people always feel bad about long rambling answers on podcasts,
Uh-huh.
and like if you didn't do that, it would be boring. Like the point of being a guest on a podcast is to be long-winded and ramble and talk about yourself.
No, see, I see it. Oh, I can do that. I can definitely do that. But I see it more as a conversation. So I didn't want to cut you off. And for people who love Jonathan, be thinking like, yeah, Sarah, stop talking. I want to hear more from Jonathan. So
Well, my guests have heard me tell the same story about the Providence Marathon about 47 times. So they're happy to hear somebody new.
oh my gosh, that's so funny. Can I tell one story that comment prompts for me is my business partner, Dimity McDowell, and I, we've put together a couple Ragnar teams in the before times. And so that we would, have our 5 runners plus ourselves in one, Dim and her posse's in one van and I'm in the other. And so after the Ragnar race was over and we're head back to the hotel, I'm like, "Hey, Dim, I'll hop in your van, you hop in mine, so we can get to know these 5 people on our team who we didn't get to know." So we did that, and it was kind of a long drive. This was the Napa Valley Ragnar, and we were staying maybe an hour away, and I forget.
And you had to stop at the vineyard in between, right?
Right,
So
it
like
was
a 4 hour
nighttime. There was yeah, right. So I start telling a story, and I hear 2 of the women kind of whispering, and I'm like, "Oh, what is it?" Thinking they've said something interesting. And one of them named Erin goes, "Oh, I was just telling her that you'd already said that story on the podcast." I was like, "Oh, okay." And I'm like, "Note to self: tell new anecdotes." And so then I'm telling something else, and I hear pss, 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 again, and I'm like, "Oh no, another repeat story." And they're like, "Uh huh."
It's amazing. It's such a fine line because like some of this stuff is like fundamentally what has allowed me to learn these big lessons. Like the story that I reference over and over again is the Providence Marathon, where I celebrated 2 years of fitness and executed like the most perfect race I've ever run before.
Uh-huh.
But I've talked about that race in some way, probably like 24 times on this podcast. So fortunately, you will be sharing this, and hello,
Oh, a
new
new
listeners.
audience. It's like my husband. My husband, I swear he married me. This is my second husband, Jack. I swear he married me because I laugh at his jokes, no matter how many times he's told them. And we've been on like road trips with people, and the other people are like, "That's really not funny. Why is Sarah laughing at that?" And then, of course, that makes me laugh more. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, it's so terrible because I've laughed at it before."
That's great. I do the same thing. So perfect. We're gonna get along just fine. So back to podcasting and running for a second until we find our way away from it. Um, so do you remember why you did your first marathon?
Yes, I
Switching
do.
gears completely.
So I did the first marathon I did was the San Francisco Marathon and 1998, and I had started
You told
dating.
that story already.
Yeah. Ba-bum-cha. So I had husband number one had left me suddenly in 1995, 95, 96, 95, one of those years. And um,
The mid
and
'90s.
yeah, exactly. Thank you. And then started dating Jack, now husband number two, or my current husband, I'm supposed to say, because saying number two implies I'm going to have a number three. One can always hope.
I was
Um,
going to say something there.
I did have a very nice dream about an actor from Humans last night. Um, so okay, so I lived in San Francisco at the time. Jack lived in Chicago, and I was a freelance writer. And so I had a very flexible schedule. And gosh, I just missed him so much. So I went and temporarily lived in Chicago with him in March of 98. And I loved San Francisco. I still love San Francisco. And I'm sorry, but at the time I did not love Chicago. Now that I'm not living in a north facing apartment, where my boyfriend's ex girlfriend also lived in the apartment building, I very much love Chicago. But at the time, not so much. And so I decided before I left that I would need to have a reason to go back to San Francisco, and I needed to have something to keep myself occupied other than just focusing on this new guy. So I figured if I did the San Francisco Marathon, I would quote unquote have to fly back for it, and I would have all those training miles to put in. Plus, it had, but that wasn't the only reason. It had definitely, the idea had been pinging around in my head ever since I watched the San Francisco Marathon, was at the finish line, was so amazed by the variety of people who came across the finish line.
Yes.
And when I was watching it, I was still married to husband number one, and he and I had watched coverage of it on TV. I can't believe they showed the San Francisco Marathon on the local TV, but we
They
watched.
barely do that today.
Right, I know. Oh, and please, I mean, the Portland Marathon, you don't even know what was going on here, and
Well, the
so.
Boston Marathon is mostly just commercials and rain.
And so he and I watched it and saw the woman who was in the lead, and we were so excited. We go down to Golden Gate Park, which at the time was where the race finished, with one lap around this track, and we're standing up against the fence. There's no one there to spectate. And here comes the woman that we'd seen on TV, and we were like, "Hey, great job! You look so good." And she turns to us and goes, "Thank you." And I was like, the finish line is right there. Don't waste your breath talking to us. And I thought she was so kind and so wonderful and so inspiring. I have no idea who she was. I guess I could figure out what year it is and look it up. And so that just got the bug in me. And I had a friend. I guess the reason we went to the finish line was to see our friend Julie Atherton finish. So we had a dog in the fight, so to speak. Yeah.
So something you said there is the exact reason that I decided to run a marathon
Oh.
the first time as well. I was in your at one time neck of the woods, Wellesley, watching the Boston Marathon in 2013, and I was standing basically at mile 12 or 13. And I said the exact same thing. I was like, look at all these people that are different shapes and sizes. They're freaking running a marathon. That's cool. Like they're all running for many hours at a time. And my longest run at the time was like 7 miles. And
Uh-huh.
I had done that like 3 times. And I thought that was incredible. Like, took me an hour and, this and that. Um, and I was like, this is so cool. Look at all these people doing this. And I was 23 at the time. So I felt obviously like very invincible, as a
Uh-huh.
23-year-old does.
Yes.
And I was like, if they can do it, I can do it. I'm pretty athletic. So, so humbled.
Um,
Um,
I also vividly remember seeing a man who had blood on his shirt coming toward the finish line because he had bloody nipples. And I thought that was the nastiest thing I'd ever seen. I was like, whoa, dude, like, not okay.
yeah, it's weird the things that like are totally acceptable in this weird sport that we do. Um, but yeah, it was the same thing. It was like, look at all these people that
Hmm.
they're doing it. And my favorite thing to shout at marathoners
Hmm.
is, "You're doing it! Like, you are doing it!" And I like doing this. I did this in 2018 and 2019 at the Boston Marathon, at like mile 23,
Uh-huh.
and this was like 3 p.m. So these are the people that are running 5-hour marathons. I think that math works out.
Uh-huh.
So they had been running for like 4.5 hours at that point, and
Yeah.
I'm just screaming, "You're doing it!" And the smiles that it brought to these people, who many of them are like first time marathoners, and like, because I know this because it says it on their shirt. Um, it's so cool.
Yeah.
So I don't know where I was going with that,
And it's
but
also funny because if you told a non-runner that you said that, they're like, and why were you stating the obvious like that? Like, that's idiotic, Jonathan.
what up, dude? Say something better. So, okay, so your first marathon was for an excuse to go to another city. I am
Back to
desperately
where I lived. Yeah. So because I owned my apartment in San Francisco, so I went back there. Yeah. So it was
right, right, right.
yeah, yeah, yep.
There were other ones that weren't quite as hilly, but apparently you didn't know that. The Golden Gate Bridge must have been incredible to run over.
So I mean that just never gets old. I mean, and it was so beautiful. I vividly remember it. And I also remember that I peed over there. Didn't seem to be any porta potties. So that's where I formed my one of my maxims in life, which is people are more embarrassed to see your butt than you are to have them see your butt.
Also, I think coming from Marin, that makes you an honorary trail runner too.
Good. So yeah, so because I saw men just, whipping it out and peeing, and I'm like, well, okay, I'm just gonna cop a squat right here. If they're not going to provide porta potties for us.
Yeah, it's fascinating what's allowed, like with all the police around. The One of the times I ran the Boston Marathon, it was the same exact thing. But like, you're coming from a little village of dirt and porta potties,
Hmm.
and in the first the first
Oh,
800 meters, they're just dudes peeing on trees everywhere.
oh my gosh! As you say that, I can totally picture that. The first time I saw guys doing that, I'm like, wait, what are you doing? And the same thing happens at Big Sur. That because
What's the
again,
views there?
yeah, right, and it just goes straight into the ocean. It's salt water anyway. Um,
It's neutralizing, yeah. So we've covered the first marathon.
mhm,
You didn't know how difficult it was, but you wanted to get back to San Francisco there, so we'll
mhm,
check that box.
mhm.
Um, you crossed the finish line. Ouch, that was hard. I imagine
Oh,
was
killer.
part
Mhm.
of what you said. So why did you do it again?
Well, I vividly remember laying on my couch in my office on the afternoon, having completed the marathon, and called a good friend of mine, Bevan, who lives in Denver, and she had run a marathon maybe 3 weeks beforehand, and we had talked afterward. And she was like, "Oh, it was fun. It was fun. It was da 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 da." And I call her up. I'm like, "Why didn't you tell me it was going to be so hard?" She's like, "Because you were going to do it, and I didn't want to dissuade you. Like I didn't want to discourage you." So I was like, "You lie, you lie." Fast forward, it was pretty crazy. Bevan and I both ended up having our respective first children within 3 weeks of each other. So I like to follow in Bevan's footsteps. Um, So, well, I just, of course, like many marathoners, swore I was one and done, never going to do that again. And then just started thinking about the New York City Marathon. I was like, oh, it's back sort of in my home turf. And Dimity, now my business partner, she had run it a couple years ago. And so I ended up doing that the following year. So I ran July 98, ran San Francisco, and then ran New York in November 99. And I know it's heresy to say, but that was probably one of my least favorite marathons. I was not impressed with the New York City Marathon.
So, I don't have any listeners from New York. Don't worry.
I'm not. As I say, grew up outside New York City. I have never felt a love for New York City. So, I don't know, troll me on Twitter or whatever. But
it's okay. This Red Sox fan is quite pleased with how you're saying this.
So, although, gosh, I felt so much better at the end of the New York City Marathon, and I'm convinced it's because I had to walk so dang far to get to the subway because I rode the train in from Stamford, and so took the train back to Grand Central and went back out to Connecticut.
So that's Mike Wardian's secret to success. He says after, he ran a 100-mile race and then did a mile on the track the next morning. So
wow,
it's quite logical. No, his recommendation is just don't stop moving. Yeah. And some of that is metaphorical and some of it's literal. Like you finish a race, you should walk around a little bit. You should keep it rolling, keep it moving.
Yep.
And honestly, I found that the work from home year we're having this year is making workout days and long run days more challenging because I don't go anywhere, right. And I don't go out to lunch and I don't go walking. So I have to intentionally decide to keep moving because otherwise my legs turn stiff.
From your desk to the refrigerator isn't quite far enough to get the legs moving.
I'm sitting here at my desk and I can see the refrigerator. So no, it's not far enough. But yes, I do quite a lot of those repeats.
Yeah, I remember after San Francisco, I finished running San Francisco. A friend joined me. This was back in the day when it was easier to hop in and join somebody in a race. And she probably met me, I don't know, around mile 20 or something like that. And we sat down on the grass afterward. And boy, it was really rough getting up from sitting down. It was tough to get down on the ground to start with, but then getting back up was even harder, perhaps. Yeah.
My first marathon was out in Western Mass, and my grandparents and my dad, I think my mom was there too. They were at the finish line. Yeah, they were all there. And there's a photo of me sitting on the ground afterwards, and I'm just like, we're not going anywhere. and this marathon had a particularly gnarly finish where you hit mile 26, then you turn right, and then you go uphill for the rest of it. Like 10% grade. and there's a photo of me and it was like such a small race. There were 220 people in it, and it felt like it was a supported long run. And so obviously they didn't have like a finishing chute or anything like that. They just had like a clock with a tarp with a timing mat at the end. So I see this. This is my first marathon, and I see this. It's my second race, so I wasn't really like aware of how these things work. So I see this like black line, and I'm so delirious that I'm like, "Cool, I'm done." So I throw my hands up, and there's this photo of the race director standing at the finish line, pointing at the finish line. He's like, "Bro, you're not there yet." So I had stopped moving, and he's like, no, you got like 10 more feet to go. And then the reason I'm telling this story is that same exact experience of like, okay, I can't go anywhere. And then an hour later I stood up, and I remember walking around Holyoke, and we were going to get a burrito, and I was stunned how I couldn't step up curbs.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I was using the handicap pedestrian ramp so that I could move my hips enough. And my grandpa, who was, I don't know, 80 something at the time, was like, Jonathan, like, let's go, let's hurry up. We got we got places to be. So fantastic memory of total immobilization post race. Love it.
Being shamed by your grandpa.
Exactly. So fast forward a few years, you've run a few more marathons, and another mother runner exists.
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
So that was born out of a marathon in, let's see, in 2007. Well, so Dimity, again, my business partner, she and I, Dimity also went to Colgate and was a rower there, but we are 6 years apart, so we did not overlap. But I met her at a Colgate crew like reunion event, and so we became friends. She was also a freelance magazine writer. We would back in the day, the highfalutin days when brands would take you on a press trip. And so we got to, go to Moab and Jackson Hole and Orlando, or I guess,
Ooh, exquisite.
Disney World. You always say those three places in the same breath.
Next up is Newark.
Yeah, right. So, and to top it off, we were roommates when we went to Walt Disney World for a press trip, and our room got broken into. And Dimity at the time, this is a side note, Dimity at the time was an editor at Self Magazine, and it was like, I don't know, the 23rd of the month or something, and she had like $72 stolen out of her wallet. And I remember she said, "But that was my money for the rest of the month." And I was like, oh, shoot. I need to give you some money. So anyway, so we got to know each other by doing these press trips. And so then when Dimity was pregnant with her second kid, she wanted to prevent going into a postpartum depression as best she could prevent that by training for a marathon after she gave birth. And so she thought, well, who can I call that will definitely say yes? And she's like, I'll call my crazy friend Sarah because, she'll definitely take me up on it. And so we trained. She lives in Denver. I live in Portland, Oregon. We trained, quote unquote, together for the Nike Women's Marathon in 2007. And we got an assignment to write a feature about it for Runner's World magazine. And yes, this is an answer to your question, how we started the brand. And we blogged about it on runnersworld.com. We were the marathon moms. And so we just found a really great reception to our blog posts about juggling. At the time, I had 3 very small kids. Dim had the 2 kids, and just, being busy, active moms and kind of getting it all done in a day. So we blog about that type of stuff. And so Dimity decided, hey, let's write a book that talks to this same audience that we've been talking to on the website and that our article spoke to. And I was like, yeah, sure, let's do it. So we wrote a book called Run Like a Mother, which came out in 2010. And our publisher said, okay, you guys have to promote this. You have to have a Facebook page and, a Twitter account. There was no Instagram at the time, which is hard to believe. And so
how do people know what you had for lunch?
Exactly. So we just started promoting, and also our publisher gave us a pretty nice travel, account to go promote the book. And so for folks who don't know us, I'm 5'11", Dimity's almost 6'4". And so we, with these 2 Amazonians, would go to race expos and be standing there with our bright yellow books at a table. And she immediately was like, no one's going to come up to, talk to us. We're just like so intimidating. We need to get some, something cute on the table. And so we made 2 t-shirts. And so there we were selling our books and our 2 t-shirts and going to all these race expos. And so it just really grew organically. Like I said, we were both freelance writers. We were not looking to start a business, start a brand, get out of freelancing, nothing. It was just something we did as a side hustle. And pretty soon the side hustle became more of our time, work time than the writing. And so we gave that up. And a decade later, here we are. With 2 more books. We have a trio of books. We're just like, originally the Hunger Games and we launched our podcast in 2011. So we're kind of ahead of the curve on that one. We're coming up on, I think episode 447 comes out tomorrow as I'm talking to you. And just like it grew like a tree with many branches, and we just keep adding branches and just growing our brand and loving it. Like I'm so pleased we did it.
I love that story. I think the organic growth of anything is in this manner is fantastic. It's like you didn't have a plan, but and I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm saying
Oh,
it's like
we did
it
not have a
wasn't
plan. That is a statement of fact, Jonathan.
right. So it wasn't the like we have a business plan. We had this is the goals. These are the KPIs. It was like we have this thing that we think is cool. Let's see if other people think it's cool. And I think that some of the best products and brands and communities are built on that, where it's not intentional, but it works.
Well, thank you, and I agree with you. And two things to spin off from that is one. I remember in the early days of AMRs, we like to abbreviate it. I talked to two men who I know who super successful in the workforce, and one of them launched a business and sold it to the top competitor, and retired early. The other one, early investor in Twitter, like super high achieving guys, and they both were like, wait, if you're not doing this to make money, grow your brand, and sell it, why are you doing this? And we're like, we should do what? Like, no, that's not what we're about. And that, I remember Dimity very early on, she always said, it's not about us, it's about the people we're talking to. And so whether that was a Facebook post or eventually Instagram or our book or what our podcast topics are or whatever, it's always about the community. And I mean, we use the word community just because that's what Another Mother Runner is, not knowing that that's like a buzzword in the marketing world. And just all these things that are now deemed best practices, we just started doing because they seem like smart things to do. And, I mean, I joke that if I could go back in time, I'd have a useful major. I mean, I was an English major with a Russian minor. Like, I don't know anything about business or marketing, but it's fun and I like hustling. So.
Yeah, it's a school of hard knocks. What does community mean to you? I know you're a part of this community, but what does the word or phrase community mean for you?
For me, it means support and hand on the back from people that are not in your immediate circle. And so that I think I feel the support of when I've done races or even when I'm just out on a regular run, I feel the support of people that I've never met in real life. I can feel them urging me on. And I hope that the women who know and enjoy Another Mother Runner feel the same way. And that because, so we like to say, mothering, oddly enough, can be a very isolating experience, and running is oftentimes a solo endeavor. And so to allow people to feel connected and part of something bigger than themselves is very life affirming and also just kind of inspiring and motivating. So yeah, we like to provide that for people.
Very cool. And how did it evolve from the two of you into where you're at today with a
Yeah,
fairly sizable platform?
a lot of hustle, a lot of traveling. Like you and I were talking before we started recording. We traveled to promote the book, the first book, which came out in 2010. We followed up with, and then 2011, our podcast. Then 2012, our second book, Train Like a Mother, came out. We promoted that for Run Like a Mother, we went to bookstores, and sometimes it was like 5 people at a bookstore, or I showed up in Bellingham, Washington for a group run, and it was a group of 1. It was me by myself, and then Train Like a Mother came out. We started having house parties at women's homes, like just oh, hey, you live in New Canaan, Connecticut, and you'll host a party for us. Awesome. And then when then we switched those to being parties at running stores, so we could have more people there. And then our Facebook page just grew organically. Twitter, Instagram, the podcast seems to really be a major door as for people to enter the Another Mother Runner community. And so it was doing well, and it just kept growing. And then we started doing online training, the Train Like a Mother Club. Oh gosh, I mean, we just kept, like I said, we just kept adding branches, and it just seemed to be filling needs that people had and what they wanted. We went from those 2 T-shirts that I told you about earlier, so that people would come over and talk to us, tall gals. That expanded into the Mother Runner store that has. We used to always say it has expresses the attitude and sentiment in our books, and so kind of cute, sassy tops and hats, and now even pants and accessories. And so just kept on putting stuff out there in the world, and people found it. And I mean, I guess if there were people who, I guess we could have grown more if we had maybe, I don't know, followed the advice of those 2 successful dudes I talked to. But we are pretty happy with where we are. And we just, for a long time, it was just Dimity and me, and we've added to our team, and it continues to grow. And so that we have support, and we can activate pretty much everything we want to activate. I think.
And how has 2020 impacted what you do?
So we like to think of 2020 as the year that we got lemons and made lemonade, because we had these grand plans for 2020. It was our 10-year anniversary. So we started planning in 2019 these grand ideas that because our anniversary is kind of late February, early March. So we had, let's do this virtual run to celebrate. And then, we're going to do these things on Instagram and this thing on Facebook and on our website. And so, and we were invited to record an episode of the podcast at the New York Roadrunners, that center they have. I'm spacing on the actual official name of it. So we were going to go to New York in mid-March and do that. And that was going to be super fun and a nice way to reach new people. And so all that got shut down, or the trip did. And so we had success though with that one virtual race to celebrate our 10-year anniversary. So we're like, hey, we should do a virtual race series and have training that goes along with it. Because as I said, in our Train Like a Mother Club, I didn't say what it was, but we have supported training plans that go everything from a 5K up to an ultra and an Ironman, and nutrition and mental toughness and all this stuff. And so we put together a plan. It's called Love the Run You're With. And it kicked off in, let me think about this, April, and went to July, and had 1 race a month. And we had to tell, we were getting the medals shipped from China. And so we had to tell them, well in advance how many we wanted. And I was like, and I'm the person who orders them. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, 250. And we sold out 250 in, 36 hours. So I, contact our supplier, make that 400, make that 500. How soon do you need to know? And finally I'm like, just cap it at 1,000, So we sold out at 1,000. Again, our anticipated number was 250. So that was pretty awesome. So then that wrapped in July. We kicked off another one in August, and that just wrapped last month in November. And then we are starting another one. Another one kicks off. The program starts on February 1st. And so the Love the Run You're With series has been super successful for us. And more importantly than that, it really seems to provide something that women need during this pandemic, which is support and encouragement, and just a sense that life will go on and things will keep happening, and we can still find bright spots in the day and months.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. The adjustments that were necessary for 2020 were massive all around, of course.
Mm-hmm.
It's been interesting to see how brands and communities and things have shifted. And as you said, making lemonade out of lemons, or ice cream out of lemons, or taking it one step further. Whereas many people are, using this time as a way to innovate and do new things and try new things and try things in ways they've never done before. That is awesome to hear.
Yeah, and thank you. And it seems that also I don't know. It seems like brands are looking for brands like AMR to partner with. And that's a big part also of how, AMR success is partnering with brands, and that they seem to be like, wow, look at them. They're having authentic conversations with people and connecting with people on a meaningful level. And let's try to tag team onto that. And so that we've just had, I mean, we're now partners with Nordic Track and Corso and a couple other brands. And it's just really exciting to have faith put in us for what we're doing and what we're enjoying doing and what seems to be, again, filling a, a niche in women's lives that makes, that improves their lives.
Yeah, it is. It is fascinating. And so, from where I sit on the brand side, with what I do outside of the podcast, I've always said that. So I've seen what's happened with some of the mother runners that are professional athletes, and I've never understood why major apparel brands have been so decisive in a negative way when a woman becomes pregnant.
Mm-hmm,
And I'm like,
mm-hmm.
look, this is the most relatable this person is ever going to be. They're literally living the human experience by creating a human. And so it's cool that you have a brand that like that is the audience, and the brands that you work with. I'm seeing Noon and Goo and all these awesome brands on your site, and like they get it, and they get that these are the people that, or the women that need to be, they need to be speaking to, and it's cool that you have this community where it is authentic and it is organic, and they've invested into it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I mean, Noon and Goo have both been with us. We had for our 1 year anniversary of the launch of Run Like a Mother, we had what we called our Relamiversary. So our LAM stands for Run Like a Mother. And so I had a party here in Portland. Dimity had one in Denver. And that was probably the first time I put on my marketing hat. I'm like, hey, let's get sponsors for the party. And Dim was like, what are you talking about? Nobody's going to want sponsored. I'm like, yeah, they will. And so, I mean,
Well, Goo just loves a good time, so they'll sponsor anything that sounds fun. You just got to have Celia involved.
I love Celia. Oh my gosh, love her to death. So yeah, and we always have a party down at Goo headquarters, and we were supposed to have one in late March, and that got canceled. So hopefully we'll, I doubt we'd have one in March of 2021, but hey, there's always 2022.
Right.
And so, yeah, and at the time, our podcast producer knew the founder of Noon. So he hooked us up with them. And so, and I'd written about Noon a million years before for the New York Times. So gave them some love. And so, yeah, Noon and Goo came on board, anniversary of year one, and have been with us ever since. And it's, I mean, women and particularly moms are the decision makers. They are the people who purchase stuff. I don't need to tell you that. And very much, particularly because we have a lot of.
To tell the audience this, I forget the name of the book, but I read it in college, and it said that women influence 75% of buying decisions. So
Oh yeah,
that alone is all the evidence you need.
Exactly. And also that another mother runner, first of all, you don't have to be a mom to be, in the community, and there's no entry fee to be quote unquote a part of another mother runner.
Just one baby.
Yeah. No. You can, no, you none. And, you can have fur baby, or you can just have not. We have actually I meet a lot of young women kind of in their early to mid 20s who listen to our podcast in particular, or women who are new moms who say, oh, I was listening to you guys for years before I ever became a mom. And so, which just tickles me to death. And so, but that we do have a wide range of runners. We have everybody from just lacing up their shoes for the first time to multi-time Boston runners and everything in between. But that we do have a lot of new or resuming runners, and they are just looking for suggestions. Women love taking suggestions from their friends, from trusted, people in their lives. And whereas we always think that, there's a lot of runner dudes out there, and maybe they've been doing it for 10, 20 years, and they're like, no, 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 I know what shoes I like. I wear these specific brand of shorts. I'm not going to switch. And these women are like, oh yeah, I used to run in college, but that was 15 years ago. So tell me what's the best kind of capris I should wear or something like that. And it's like, oh,
Oh,
and
using logic.
yeah. Yeah. So we and we only, we get approached by a lot of brands, and we don't say yes to everybody. So we very are, again, going back to the word authentic, that when we say we like something, it's because we really like something. And Dimity's always like, we're not going to put something out there into this world unless we know it's going to make our runs and lives better or easier or more enjoyable.
Definitely. I think that I wish more people would follow that. Thanks again to GU Energy Labs for sponsoring this episode. Initially known as the Energy Gel Company, GU now offers several different product lines designed to meet the needs of today's athlete. It's not just the mid-run refueling option that I love, but their post-run recovery protein that mixes so well with coffee, or even the before-bed magnesium and vitamin D supplement too. No other magnesium supplement has worked as well as theirs has for me. This season of running is a great time to try something new, so why not try GU? For the long run listeners, get 20% off anything on their site with the code FTLR at guenergy.com. And now back to our conversation. Shifting gears a little bit, let's talk about failure. Can you think of a time when something didn't go as you had hoped, and what was the takeaway?
Play some music so that I can think for a second.
Please enjoy this music while your story is being reached.
Yeah. Well, I do think about a time that I let Dimity down, and that made for a very disappointing personal experience, and that I still can kind of taste that feeling that I let her down, which was, we were invited for the launch of Train Like a Mother. We were invited to Kansas City to speak for a group, and I was supposed to put together the presentation, and I just kept dragging my feet. And so Dimity had to swoop in at the last minute and do it. So that was not good on my part. So really making sure that I carry my full weight, and, that it's really a shared, they were both pushing the rock up the hill. So yeah, I mean, just trying to think of some stumbles that AMR has taken. We were pretty conservative in things we do, because we don't have any employees, and so that we have contractors. So we have to know that we have the woman power to carry things to fruition. So maybe, if we were one of those two dudes I talked to, we would have tried bigger things and failed. But I guess we were more cautious and be like, oh, okay, here's the steps we're going to take to, see this through as we'd like. Yeah, that was a non-satisfying answer. I'm sorry.
All good. No, I think the risk, I don't want to say risk tolerance, but risk tolerance is interesting. Mm-hmm. Some people are out swinging and taking big swings and striking out 9 out of 10 times, and on other people it's just brick by brick by brick by brick. Mm-hmm. And I think both are effective strategies, and it's whatever is going to be more sustainable for you, mm-hmm. In order to continue to grow.
Yeah, and of course now I'll mull this question over on my next 10 runs and be like, oh, I should have said this, I should have said that. But that, for so long it was just Dimity and me, and that was really taxing on us, on each of us, on our families, on the business. And so then as we got more people, we just knew we didn't want to put ourselves under the immense burden that we had been under. And, I've enjoyed every step along the way, but it was a lot of pressure for a long time. And so now we just, we still work the same amount of hardness, but it doesn't, because we have a larger team, it doesn't feel like such a heavy lift.
That makes sense. Something that you've sort of just alluded to is the impact on family and your own running and whatnot. How do you feel about balance? And I'll preempt that a little bit more with this is one of those pillars that I talk about a lot on this podcast. And again, people are going to be like, you're the Lindsay Krause, Mary Johnson comparison. So I had Lindsay Krause on, and she explained her take on balance as being like three pieces of a triangle. And at some point, you can, it can be equilateral, and sometimes it's obtuse, and sometimes, it can be different shapes at different times. And Mary's example was seasons. So some seasons I'm all in on running, and some seasons I'm all in on family and work and this and that. And then other people are like, balance is overrated. I just go X, Y, Z. So where do you fall on that spectrum?
Well, I'd like to say that I don't have any answer as poetic as Lindsay or Mary's, which bums me out as an English major. But
Lindsay writes for a small publication called the New York Times, so she's a bit more in practice. I know you're
right. It's a little rusty, yeah. So so I have so my three teens, one's 18 and two of them are 15 because they're twins, and so for
that math checks out.
Yeah. So when the twins were young, I sometimes used work as an escape because, gosh, they were just such a loud, raucous handful. And so, if I could turn the clock back, because now I see how quickly they've grown up and I see pictures of them as little, and I'm like, oh, I just want to go back and squeeze them. So, certainly in retrospect, I wish I had spent more time with my family, with my young family. But I would say I've become better in the past couple years. Actually, since I started meditating, I do the daily calm most mornings. I really kind of just think, okay, now I'm working, and now I'm turning it off, and I'm turning to my family, and I'm with my family. And so not checking the phone as much, not opening the computer. And, it's hard to remember, again, like you and I were talking before we hopped on the recording, how much I traveled for work, in the before times. And I loved that. But I definitely now realize that it was somewhat to a detriment of my family, because just the other night, my 15-year-old daughter said, yeah, you used to travel a lot. And I said, did you like that? And she was like, no, it's much better now that you're here all the time. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a little
How did that hit?
Yeah, that hit hard. Yeah. And although it hit hard, but I was also pleased that she said it, because, a lot of, she's 15. So a lot of the time I feel like I'm getting pushed away. And so to feel that she is appreciative of me being here felt good. Because the only person that in my mind seems to really love having me around all the time is our French bulldog. And he's going to be, Augie is going to be crushed when I start traveling again. Like he's going to be devastated. But it turns out that maybe my kids will be a little bit too. So that's nice. So I don't know if I ever strove for balance. And certainly I have to say that as a recreational runner, I did not compromise on my workouts. Like that's a non-negotiable for me. I no matter what was going on in my life or is going on in my life, I'm getting out there and getting it done, because I just enjoy the heck out of it way too much to give that up.
That part's interesting. I feel like a lot of people feel guilty about that. And I am in the other camp where it allows me to be better in every area of life, work, relationships, family, all that stuff. I find that to be all better because of having this consistency.
Jonathan, you are a mother runner at heart, because as you were talking, I could hear Dimity talking at all those parties that we'd have at running stores and everything, who would say that, because a big premise of AMR is to leave the mommy guilt behind, and that I can just see tall Dimity ticking off on those long fingers of hers, saying that when you get your workout in, you come back and you're a more supportive spouse, a more patient mother, a more productive employee, a more responsive partner, or whatever it is.
Why do you think that is?
Because you get your yayas out there. And because I'll speak in the first person. I get out there and I feel that I have accomplished something. I have checked something off my to-do list. I have done something just for me. I've maybe gotten to listen to a podcast or music or an audiobook. I have been in nature, which I love. I've maybe spent time with my best running friend. So I just gain so much from being out there that my cup is refilled. And whether that's patience or understanding or whatever, I have more of it to give back to the people in my life.
Definitely. So as a fellow road warrior, you'll appreciate my analogy. I like to hear the reminder from the flight attendant, please put your own mask on first before helping those around you. And I feel that that's true in every sense of the word. You can't help people, whether it's what you do for work or for family or whatever, if you're burnt out or if you're not enjoying yourself. So I think it's fundamental, and it's an invitation to be what some might consider selfish, but I don't think it's selfish. I think it's or maybe it's just a rationalization, but I think it's fundamentally critical to have that time for yourself.
Jonathan, we are cut from the same cloth. I can't, within the past 48 hours, I have thought of the put on your own oxygen mask before helping those around you. Like, I just think that all the time. And I really believe that children can be a lot more self-sufficient. I mean, yes, if the plane was going down, I would help them, but like when I would travel, so I oftentimes
the plane's going down, the mask isn't really going to help you.
And at least we're all together. I swear, this is no jokes aside. If I'm going to die in a plane crash, I want my entire family to be with me, because it would just be it would be so upsetting to have some of us left behind. Wow, that went dark really fast. So let's go back to when I oftentimes would fly cross country with all three of my kids. And so we'd get on the plane, and my philosophy was like, if I'm flying by myself, I don't worry about the dude sitting next to me, whether has something to read, whether he's watching something, listening. Like, I don't care whether he's entertained or not. And I feel sort of the same way about my kids. As long as they don't bother, like when they were younger, as long as they didn't bother people, that was their business, whether they were entertained on an airplane or not. And so, like, I guess self-sufficiency is very important to me. And so, yeah. I don't know. That just went all over the place, didn't it? So,
yeah. I mean, I just want to talk about air travel. Like, how weird is it? How weird is it that I know that you've had these experiences where you go the whole flight cross country, so 6 hours, and you start talking to the person next to you like as you're landing, and then you're like, oh shit, this person's like really interesting. Right. I know you've done that, right?
I have. I started talking to a woman getting off a flight. She was the row ahead of me, and I think I probably helped her get something out of the overhead bin. Oh, it turns out that she is the daughter of our neighbors around the corner, and she now lives in Africa, and she was just coming back to see her parents after doing volunteer work for like 3 years. And I'm like, oh my gosh.
It's like the most interesting people. Yeah. I had a flight. I was going to Boulder, and the woman sitting next to me was about my age, and we didn't say anything to each other until we were landing. And then it turned out that we had like a few mutual friends, and she was a travel nurse, so she was going back and forth between New Hampshire and Colorado. And then the next time I was in Colorado, I saw her on the street.
Of course you did.
On Pearl Street in Boulder. Yeah. And I texted her. I was like, Lindsay, was that you? She was like, yeah. So I ended up like getting margaritas with her and her friend. And then I met her friend, and her friend's like from South Africa and has these incredible stories that were told in this incredible accent. And I was like, wow, we could have had like a really interesting 6-hour flight and pissed off everybody around us for talking the whole time. But yeah, it's just wild.
One of my favorites was I was flying from here, Portland, to Denver, and it turns out that the woman next to me, she lives like a mile from me or something, and it turns out we both had the same Trader Joe's crush, as in like which employee we just thought was so cute, who, by the way, no longer works there, which is upsetting. But so,
We know that.
so it's like, da, 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 da. I'm like, oh, and I don't know why I made it. I'm like, oh, I just think Brett is just the cutest. She's like, oh my gosh, I love Brett too. So not only that we both, imaginarily lusted after the same, but that we deemed it a Trader Joe's crush, like that we had one. Because I'm not sure, but I think not everybody has a Trader Joe's crush. If you don't, you should get one. But yeah, anyway.
I can't say that I do, but
I live for Trader Joe's, by the way.
I live next to a Trader Joe's, but nice. Maybe I should go in there.
Right.
I could go
on. How do you pivot from that, Jonathan? Go on. It's your job. It's not mine.
Yeah. So, one question that wild curveball or change of topic. Like I said, I could go on forever asking these types of questions, but I think the last one I've got is, what do you wish people knew about you?
Oh,
wildly different than Trader Joe's crushes and plain conversation.
Well, being a podcast host, as you know, people know a lot about, when you're a podcast host, people know a lot about you. I guess I'd want people to know that I really am who I am. That that the me I show up with at events and at on the podcast, that's really who I am. Like that's not me being who I think I should be. I think it was John Dryden who said we're constantly invited to be ourselves. I could be wrong about who said that. But just, I really think it's important to show up and be yourself. And so like that I am kind of sarcastic. I like TMI topics. I am very enthusiastic about running, and that makes some people kind of, gag a little bit. I don't love all children, but I love my own children very much. I cry really easily. And I am truly a morning person. Let's circle back. Love nothing better than circling back. I am truly a morning person. And that I love very deeply. I am not an extended family holiday person, which is very highlighted almost in this year of pandemic. I'm like, who cares that I can't see my family Thanksgiving? But that the people who I choose to have in my life, I love so much. And thanks to AMR, that circle has grown larger. Like for instance, we haven't gotten many Christmas cards this year, and I'm not taking it personally, but the majority of the Christmas cards we've gotten this year, or holiday cards, have been from mother runners who, yes, I've met most of them in real life, but some of them I haven't. And I just love getting those cards. Like that makes me smile so much.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
We'll have to have a Patreon version of a sarcastic TMI podcast.
Oh yes.
$3 for 30 jokes.
I mean, TMI is one of the cornerstones of AMR. This is an addendum to your question about how AMR grew. We started doing what ended up being called TMI Tuesday, meaning that the first post on Tuesday mornings on our Facebook page is TMI questions that women really ask us, and no topic is off limits. And I have two. I'm going to keep talking right now. I'm going on the rant you want me to.
Go for it.
First of all, that someone else named it TMI Tuesday. So that was awesome. I think that was Erica in New Hampshire. And that really, back in the day, this was early Facebook. And so the algorithm really worked in our favor because these women would just comment. And I just would always be like, people can see that you're talking about bleeding through a tampon on, in a race or pooping or something like that. And we got a lot of Facebook followers that way because everybody would be like, oh, look, Claire commented on another mother runner. What's that? And so there's that. And gosh, what was my second point about that? Oh my goodness. Oh, I know that when we did the outline for Run Like a Mother, when you turn in a book proposal, you have to turn in table of contents. And the book is divided into 26 chapters with then these little point twos in between, which are kind of like palate cleansers, kind of amuse-bouches of just short little things. And so when Dimity had when we put together the list and she had misnumbered it, and as we were about to turn in, she's like, oh, shoot, there's only 25 chapters. We need a whole other chapter. And I said, let's do one on TMI. And so it's called, I think it's called the 4 Ps or something. It's peeing, pooping, periods, and passing gas, maybe? Or no, peeing, pooping, periods, and I am embarrassed to say, I think it might be passing gas, but I'm not sure about what the 4th P is. But anyway, that's what we alternated writing chapters. I'm like, that's mine. I'm doing it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
The TMI on the podcast thing is very relatable. I've had dating app matches tell me they've listened to podcast episodes. Wow, you've learned a lot about me in that episode with XYZ.
One of the best anecdotes ever shared on our podcast was by a mother runner named Bethany who lives outside of Philly, and we helped her get a entry from a brand to run Boston, and so she chronicled her training on our website. And so she came on the podcast afterward and wrote blog posts about running Boston. And on the podcast, she's told us that in a porta potty at Athletes Village, she birthed her tampon. And I don't know what that means, but let's just say that it just got too heavy for its own good. Just emerged anyway, so that thankfully she was in the porta potty when it happened. And now you're like, boy, if that ever happens to someone I'm dating, I'm out of there. And
I don't know, but I may have to put an explicit on this.
And so, I mean, whenever we do a best of show and we ask people for their favorite anecdotes, and that was like episode, I don't know, like 89 or something. And they'll always be like, the Bethany birthing her tampon. I'm like, I can't include that one again. It was in episode 100.
Yeah, there's some things that happen in that Athletes Village that should never be spoken about. That's a dirty, dirty place.
I am still friends with people who I befriended in Athletes Village because they let me borrow their Body Glide. And I mean, that's pretty nice.
So I ran in 2015, and I ran with like a bunch of friends. There were, I don't know, 10 of us that took the bus together, and between everybody, we used a very large jug of lube, body glide, or I forget what it actually was, but it was like a tub of this gel, and I forget what we called the bus. But the motto was, if you like it, lube it. And I think we should wrap there.
I want to make a song. If you like it, lube it. If I like it, I lube it.
So I don't have outro music, but today that's going to be the outro music. Thanks so much for coming on and taking some time to chat.
I obviously enjoyed it immensely. Thank you.
Of course.
I like it. I lube it.
That's it for today's episode. Like many long runs, it's sad when it has to end. I hope you join in next week on For the Long Run. And in the meantime, happy trails. If you've enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to me if you shared it so that others can find it and enjoy it too.